I am Teresa Wilson, and this is the beginning of the story I never thought I would tell out loud. America has always been my home, my map, and my cage all at once. I grew up in Boston, in a small gray house on Maple Street with shutters that never quite closed. That house smelled like floor polish, dry toast, and the iron clothes my mother folded into stiff squares. My father used to say the walls of a house should carry discipline, not comfort. My mother said curtains should never wrinkle, because wrinkles showed weakness. My sister, Sarah, was the golden child, the one who took all of their ambition and wore it like a crown. And me? I was the extra piece, the one they could not quite fit into the family puzzle. The morning everything shattered was colder than most Boston mornings, even for winter. The kind of cold that turns the sky pale and makes the airport glass look like ice. We were at Logan Airport, standing at departures. My parents were sending Sarah off to New York for her wedding weekend. I was supposed to follow later, once work allowed. At least that was the plan they told me. But plans have a way of changing without warning. My father, Albert Wilson, stood stiff as always, his coat buttoned too tight. My mother, Margaret, had that sharp look in her eyes, the one that meant she had decided something final. Sarah stood beside them, wearing a scarf the color of champagne, smirking like a girl who already had the world in her hand. Beside her was Ethan Reed, her fiancé, tall and handsome but strangely silent, as if he had already guessed something was about to break. I was pulling my carry-on toward the counter when my father called my name. He held something in his hand, my passport. He lifted it high like a trophy. For a moment, I thought he was only checking it, making sure I hadn't forgotten it. But then my mother flicked open a small lighter she carried in her bag. She had always loved fire, candles, matches, even fireplaces in summer. The flame licked the air. Before I could take a single step, the blue book was already burning. The edges curled black, the paper shrank in on itself, and the smell of charred leather and ink rose into the cold air. My father dropped the ashes onto the curb. People stared. I stood frozen, my hand still on the handle of my bag. "You're Freeloader," my mother said, her voice as sharp as glass. "You're not welcome at your sister's wedding." Sarah laughed, a cruel little laugh, the kind that cuts deeper than words. Ethan looked down at his shoes. He didn't defend me, didn't protest, didn't even flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. My throat closed, but not with grief, with clarity. All my life they had said I was less, that I didn't shine like Sarah, that I didn't deserve to belong. And now, on the sidewalk outside Logan Airport, they decided to make that judgment permanent. The ashes of my passport scattered across the pavement like dead snow. People passed us, dragging suitcases, sipping coffee, hurrying to gates, but for me, time had stopped. I could have begged. I could have asked why. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. My fingers moved almost without me thinking. I opened the list I had kept carefully tucked away for months. The wedding planner's number, the florist, the Manhattan venue, the bakery, the jazz band, the photographer, the hotel. All of them had been paid in advance. Paid by me. Paid quietly, in secret, from years of saving and a bonus I had earned at my nonprofit job. They thought it was my parents. They thought the Wilsons had covered Sarah's glittering New York wedding. They never knew it was me who had wanted to give Sarah that day, me who wanted to prove I could love her even if she never loved me back. I wrote one message. Just one. To all of them at once. Cancel everything. I pressed send. The sound of it was small, just a soft click, but it felt like a thunderclap inside me. My mother turned away, already pulling Sarah toward the entrance. My father muttered something about discipline. Sarah kissed the air, mocking me, and walked inside. Ethan gave me one long look, but he said nothing. Then they were gone, swallowed by the sliding doors, gone to board a plane I was no longer part of. I stood for a long while, staring at the smoke curling up from the ashes. Then I picked up my bag, turned around, and left. I didn't go back to my job. I didn't go back to run errands or make excuses. I went home. That small gray house on Maple Street had never felt colder than it did when I unlocked the door that evening. The walls seemed to lean in with judgment. The framed photos of Sarah's college graduation lined the hallway like a gallery of my absence. I set my suitcase down, walked into my room, and opened the closet. One by one, I pulled out the clothes I would take with me. Not much. A sweater, a few blouses, jeans, the black coat I had bought last winter for $50 at a thrift shop in Cambridge. I folded them neatly into my bag. The silence was so thick it pressed against my ears. Only once did I pause, my hands resting on the quilt my grandmother had made before she died. She had been the only one who ever whispered, "You matter, Teresa." I took the quilt, too. Then I sat on the edge of my bed, my phone buzzing against my palm. Calls were already coming in. The planner, frantic. The florist, confused. Numbers I didn't recognize, all flashing at once. I let them ring, one after another. I didn't answer. I had sent the message. I had chosen silence over explanation. And I knew in my bones that by morning, the storm would break. But that night, I simply lay down on my bed, the quilt pulled to my chin, and I whispered into the dark, "This is the end. This is also the beginning." The calls began an hour later. At first, I thought it was only the wedding planner, Josie, trying to confirm some detail. But then the phone lit up again and again, each vibration rattling the nightstand like a drumbeat. By evening, the screen showed 550 missed calls. I hadn't picked up once. Josie was the first to leave a voicemail. Her voice trembled somewhere between panic and disbelief. "Teresa, are you absolutely certain? The venue in Manhattan is prepaid, and the caterers are asking for final confirmation. We have guests flying in from across the country. Please call me back." I didn't. I stood in the kitchen with a chipped mug, waiting for the kettle to scream. Steam fogged the window, and the sound of my parents' words still echoed in my head. "You're a freeloader." As if the tens of thousands of dollars I had poured into Sarah's wedding meant nothing, as if my silence and effort were invisible because they had decided I was less. I had paid for it all. Every glittering detail. The Manhattan venue with its glass chandeliers and white marble floors, $25,000 as a deposit. The jazz band, their saxophones polished, their fee $7,200. Flowers that Sarah insisted should be nothing less than a dream, imported roses and tulips, $6,800. The fittings for her designer dress, $3,500, quietly charged to my card when she pretended she had forgotten her wallet. The block of hotel rooms reserved for guests, $9,000. The food, rich plates of lamb and salmon, $14,000. The buttercream cake with sugared petals, $2,000. Tips, transportation, small touches that no one would notice but me, another $1,000. Even Ethan, her fiancé, had benefited. His old suit had frayed seams, and he had joked about bad luck. I bought him a navy suit for $500. He didn't know where it came from. He just smiled and said thanks. Altogether, it was $68,500. My savings, scraped together from years of modest paychecks at the art nonprofit where I worked. My one bonus from a project that brought in donors. I had never boasted, never even hinted. I thought it would be a gift, a bridge between me and the family who had never seen me as enough. Now the bridge had burned with my passport. The messages poured in. My mother's text was short, as if authority could still command me. "Sarah will fix this." My father's was sharper. "Answer your phone. Do not be childish." Sarah's words dripped with arrogance. "You wouldn't dare." But I had dared. Luke Carter, Ethan's best man, left a voicemail that sounded different. Calm, steady. "Teresa, it's Luke. I don't know what's happening, but I just want to check if you're safe. Call me if you can." His voice had no judgment, only concern. For a moment, my hand hovered over the phone, but I set it down again. Safety was not the question. Resolve was. By midnight, the consequences arrived like slow thunder. The venue confirmed the cancellation. The florist sighed, disappointment heavy in her tone, but she refunded half the cost. The band sent a short note that read simply, Understood. The baker, kind woman that she was, said she would sell the buttercream cake by the slice to Sunday walkers along the river. Piece by piece, the wedding unraveled. The family group chat exploded. Dozens of messages scrolled across the screen, a storm of outrage and confusion. My aunt from Philadelphia demanded answers. My cousin wrote in all caps, "Is this a joke?" Sarah flooded the thread with fury. "You are jealous. You are bitter. You've ruined everything. I will never forgive you." I sat cross-legged on the bed, sipping tea, the quilt my grandmother made tucked around me. I let them rage. I let them drown in their own noise while I sat in silence. My silence was not weakness, it was power. For once, I was not their scapegoat or shadow. I was the storm, but storms are lonely things. The night stretched on, long and heavy. I remembered each check I had written, each wire transfer I had made, each time I told myself it was worth it. I remembered the look on Sarah's face when she bragged about the wedding to her friends, never once mentioning that the money had come from me. I remembered the quiet satisfaction I felt when I thought she would stand under those chandeliers, smile, and at least for one moment, maybe, she would see me not as less but as her sister. That hope was ash now. At 2 a.m, another voicemail came from Luke. "Teresa, I don't know the full story, but whatever they did to you, I'm sorry. Don't let them break you." His words were gentle, a small light in the dark. I didn't call him back, but I replayed it once, then again. By dawn, I knew the news would spread. Manhattan society was small. Whispers moved faster than truth. Guests would arrive at hotels only to find their rooms canceled. Florists would tell the tale of the bride's sister who pulled the plug. Bands and bakers would carry the story home. By noon, everyone would know. And me? I sat in that gray Boston house, packing quietly. I folded shirts, tucked the quilt at the bottom of my bag, slid my laptop into its sleeve. The house felt colder than ever, each wall a reminder that love had never lived here. I wasn't running away. I was moving forward. There is a difference. When the phone rang again, I let it buzz until the screen went dark. Silence was my answer, and silence carried more weight than words ever could. I thought of Sarah, furious in some Manhattan hotel, her perfect weekend slipping through her fingers. I thought of my parents, scrambling to protect their pride, to explain how their freeloader daughter had held the purse strings all along. I thought of Ethan, standing at a crossroads he had not chosen. And I thought of myself, finally free from the chains of giving without gratitude, of loving without return. As the morning light spilled across the floorboards, I zipped the bag shut. My phone still hummed with unanswered calls, but I had already made my choice. They wanted to teach me a lesson, to remind me of my place. Instead, I taught them something far heavier. You cannot build a kingdom on contempt, and you cannot erase a person who has already chosen silence. That was the true cost of everything, not the $68,500 I had spent, not the vendors scrambling, not the angry guests. The cost was the bond between us, broken clean, never to be repaired. And I was willing to pay it. The morning after the storm of cancellations, I woke to sunlight slicing across my bedroom floor. My phone was still buzzing on the nightstand, the screen crowded with missed calls and unread messages. The world outside was moving quickly, but inside me, time was still slow, steady, deliberate. I had no desire to argue with my family or defend myself. Silence had already said everything. But there were two people I knew I needed to face, Ethan and, unexpectedly, Luke. I texted Ethan first. "Meet me at the cafe near Boston Common. 10 a.m. The message felt heavy as I pressed send. He replied almost instantly, "I'll be there." The cafe was warm and smelled of cinnamon rolls and fresh espresso. I arrived early, sat by the window, and wrapped my hands around a mug of black coffee. Boston Common lay just beyond the glass, its trees bare, its benches slick from last night's frost. I watched the street, waiting for Ethan. He came in looking like he hadn't slept. His tie was crooked, his eyes shadowed, his shoulders tense. When he sat down, I noticed his hands trembling as they wrapped around his cup. I didn't know they burned your passport, he said quietly, almost ashamed. That's cruel. It's simple, I answered, keeping my voice steady. I paid for everything. I canceled everything. He stared at me, stunned. Sarah told me you tried to make the wedding about you. She said you were jealous, that you wanted attention. Did she tell you who paid? I asked. My eyes didn't leave his. He froze, his jaw working, his lips parting as if he wanted to argue, but no words came. No, he whispered. I leaned back, letting the truth sink in. For the first time, Ethan was looking at me not as Sarah's sister, not as a shadow in the background, but as a person who had quietly carried the weight of his entire wedding. Before he could answer, the bell above the cafe door jingled. Luke Carter walked in. He spotted us and came over, pulling out a chair without hesitation. His presence surprised me, but his eyes, clear, calm, full of something like compassion, eased the tension. I heard what happened, Luke said, his voice low, steady. Teresa, I'm sorry. Yesterday, I overheard Sarah on the phone. She was laughing about you. She said you didn't have real work, that you were just a wallet with legs. The words hung in the air like broken glass. Ethan's face crumpled, as though the world he had been building was collapsing right in front of him. He pressed his palms to his eyes. I wanted love, he murmured. But love can't live in a lie. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Luke sat silently, giving Ethan space, giving me strength. By noon, the truth had begun to ripple outward, spreading through Manhattan faster than wildfire. The venue manager, perhaps out of exasperation, revealed to the Reed family that the payments had all come from me, not my parents. The wedding planner, furious at the wasted effort, told the florist. The florist passed it along to the makeup team. By evening, Sarah's bridesmaids were whispering in the lobby of the hotel, shaking their heads over glasses of wine. Words like selfish, greedy, and foolish clung to Sarah's name like ash clings to burned paper. My parents, however, refused to let the truth stick. They called again, their voices hard with command. Fix this, my father demanded, his tone heavy with the same authority he used when I was a child. Teach yourself respect, my mother added, as though I hadn't just taught them the hardest lesson of all. I held the phone to my ear for a moment, letting their voices wash over me. Then I said, calm and final, I have. And I hung up. That was the last time I would hear them speak with authority over me. The wedding did not happen. Guests flew into Manhattan only to find empty hotel blocks and unanswered questions. The band moved on to another gig. The baker sold her buttercream slices by the river, strangers tasting the sweetness of a wedding that never was. And Ethan, he walked away with nothing but a small bag and a broken plan. He texted me that night. Thank you for the clear sky. I stared at the words, my throat tight, my chest heavy. Then I typed back, be free. It was not revenge I wanted, not really. It was release. For him, for me, for everyone who had been tied into Sarah's illusion. And maybe, in that fractured moment, we both received it.
Luke checked on me again the following day.
He brought coffee, stood on my porch, and didn't push for conversation. His silence was a kind of comfort, not the sharp silence my parents wielded as punishment, but the soft silence of someone who sees you and lets you breathe. That evening, as the sky dimmed over Boston, I thought of Sarah, stranded in Manhattan with her pride shattered, her reputation scarred. I thought of my parents, still pretending they had control when the world had finally seen through them. And I thought of myself, sitting in a small gray house on Maple Street, on the edge of a new beginning. The mirror had cracked, and in those cracks I saw truth. For years, I had been the quiet one, the overlooked one, the girl who stayed in the background while Sarah took the stage. But silence, I learned, was not emptiness. It was power, and when wielded with purpose, it could change everything. The wedding was gone. The family ties were torn. But for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never truly known: freedom. I left the gray house on Maple Street within the week. I didn't make an announcement. I didn't pack everything. I only took what I could carry. the quilt my grandmother had stitched with her soft, worn hands, a stack of books that had kept me company on nights when the house felt too quiet, a single box of letters I had written but never sent, and a suitcase of clothes. The rest I left behind. Let them keep the furniture and the photographs that only told half-truths. I was finished with the museum of my family's pride. Chicago called to me like a wind I couldn't ignore. The city had always seemed too big when I visited as a child, too loud and restless. But now, that restlessness felt like freedom. I boarded a one-way flight with nothing but my bag and my silence, carrying more determination than luggage. When I landed, I stepped out into a city alive with noise, the rattle of trains overhead, the honk of taxis, the chatter of strangers. For the first time in a long time, the noise didn't press me down, it lifted me. I found a small brick walk-up near a bookstore on Clark Street. It wasn't polished or modern, but the walls felt honest, not judgmental. My rent was $1,650 a month, more than I had ever paid, but for once, I didn't feel like a tenant in someone else's house. I was home. Ms. Porter, the landlord, was an older woman with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes. On my first day, she slipped a card under my door with $20 tucked inside. "For your first coffee," she wrote in looping script. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the gesture. The kind of gesture I had never received from my own family. I furnished the apartment with care, but not extravagance. A second-hand sofa for $120, a lamp for $30, a kettle that whistled like a train for $15. Each piece I chose myself, not inherited, not dictated. When I placed them in the rooms, I realized this was the first time in my life that every object around me was my choice. I found work quickly at a gallery on the north side that specialized in showcasing young painters from America and Europe. The pay wasn't extravagant, but the conversations filled me with light. Artists talked about color like it was air, about shadows as if they were secrets. One painter from Paris described how light bends differently in Europe, and I laughed, telling him that in Chicago, the wind bends everything, even people. My colleagues listened to me, respected me, and for once, I didn't feel invisible. On Sundays, I walked by Lake Michigan. I counted boats until the noise in my head quieted. The lake stretched wide, endless, reminding me that there was a world larger than my family's smallness. The water didn't ask anything of me. It simply let me exist. But freedom didn't mean forgetting. Sarah tried to call once, weeks later. I didn't answer. Instead, I read the message she left on voicemail. Her voice was tight, furious, but underneath it, I could hear the panic. "You think you taught me a lesson? You ruined me, Teresa. You'll regret this." I didn't regret it. Not then, not ever. Because in trying to teach me a lesson about obedience, they had shown me what it meant to write my own story. I learned that silence can be a sentence, sharp enough to sever ties, final enough to mark a new beginning. When I said nothing at the airport, I ended one life and stepped into another. Luke reached out, too. Not with demands or anger, but with small glimpses of his world. He texted me photos, a stray dog he'd helped find a home, a mural painted on a brick wall in Brooklyn, a sky over Manhattan that looked like new paper waiting to be written on. His messages were simple, gentle. We didn't talk about family or weddings or wounds. We talked about art, about kindness, about the odd details of ordinary life. One evening, he asked, "Would you ever visit?" I replied, "Yes, one day, when the wind is kind." He laughed and offered, half joking, to send me £50 for train snacks if I ever worked in Europe. We both laughed at the absurdity of it, but also at the truth hiding inside. Money, when not twisted into control, can be lighthearted, even funny. It wasn't about dollars or pounds. It was about trust, about knowing that generosity could exist without strings. In my Chicago kitchen, I stirred soup one evening, the smell of onions and thyme filling the air. I thought of the girl I had been, standing at Logan Airport, watching her passport burn while her sister laughed. That girl had been silent, holding an entire wedding in her hands, giving a gift no one deserved. That girl had been broken, but she had also been brave. Now, I was different. I wasn't broken, and I wasn't silent in the same way. My silence now was chosen, powerful, peaceful. I didn't owe anyone explanations or apologies. I had earned my new life the way you earn daylight, by wading through the dark and refusing to shrink. Sometimes, in the quiet of my apartment, I would hear the wind against the windows and smile. It didn't matter what my parents thought or what Sarah raged about. Their world was built on lies and appearances. Mine was built on truth. This was my house now. My name was on the lease. My furniture, my kettle, my quilt, my choices. My heart filled the rooms, and no one could take that from me. My story was mine to tell, and I had only just begun.